difficult as this pandemic has been and continues to be, there have been some unexpected surprises or benefits along the way. Most especially, I think, during that shutdown period that we had, where our lives are really restricted, and it was really difficult for us to deal with that. We may have discovered whole new worlds open to us. One of the things that I discovered was this fascinating world of bird watching. I had never considered that as something that I would want to entertain. But since our lives were restricted during the shutdown, I found myself more often sitting out on my rooftop patio. And up there I have some potted plants and flowers. And all of a sudden, I realized there was this whole world of birds that existed, and birds more than just sparrows and the occasional cardinal, and the multitude of doves, of pigeons. Same thing. I discovered that there were all these beautiful birds. I'd never seen a woodpecker in life, in person, and there it was in my garden one day. But perhaps the most striking discovery, one day I was actually working in the garden there, and I happened to look up, and as I looked up, right there in front of me, hovering in midair almost miraculously, was a tiny hummingbird. I was totally shocked. I never knew that hummingbirds existed in a major metropolitan area such as Chicago. I thought they only lived out in the country, in the suburbs. But there it was, and it actually was looking at me. And then it flirted away, and some of the flowers, it was gone, just as quickly. I was excited. I was like, wow, this is like amazing. Such a tiny little thing, seems to hover in midair, can fly backwards, and it's just gone. So I found myself wanting to see if this was just kind of a coincidence, or is this a common occurrence? So I found myself actually reorienting my life for this tiny little creature. We were shut down, of course, the office was closed, but everything had now moved to being things online, being virtual. And so I actually created an outdoor office for myself. I'd have my laptop up there. I actually reoriented the Wi-Fi in the house so that I could get the signal out there. And I would work on my laptop out there in the hopes that I would see that bird again. And I'd bring my camera out there because, of course, I love photography and I wanted to capture it. And so I'd be out there, especially that first summer, every day, waiting patiently for that moment. And sure enough, it was not just a rare occurrence. It happened. I would say probably I noticed it once every couple of weeks coming by. And sometimes I was ready. I was there with the camera, ready to take a picture, and I got some decent shots. And then there were other times when I wasn't as diligent in my preparation. I had forgotten to bring my camera out there. And there it was, and I knew that I couldn't run into my house, get the camera, come back out, and expect to find it again. Because that little guy was only around for like 10, 15 seconds, and then he'd be gone. But I can't describe for you the great amount of joy in the midst of all the depression of the pandemic and the shutdown. I can't describe to you the amount of joy that such a tiny little creature brought to me. And how my whole life, again, was reoriented for that little thing. You see, my friends, as Jesus talks in today's gospel about the kingdom of God and being vigilant and waiting for the master's return, that's the dynamic that Jesus is trying to describe for us. Because at first hearing, when we hear that, to be vigilant, to await the master's return, those words are not comfortable words for us. We don't do well with waiting. Do we? I know I don't. There are many experiences in life that I find difficult when I have to wait. And I'll describe for you one of the most difficult experiences for me that I find to be true in terms of difficulty with waiting. Grocery shopping. You know what I mean, don't you? It's bad enough that I find myself having to go not just once a week, but oftentimes 2 or 3 times a week to the grocery store. And I really do not enjoy that. I find there are a lot of things that test my patience. I seem to have a knack for always picking the longest and slowest line. I find myself often finding myself kind of frustrated by other people who move so slowly down the aisles or block the aisle entirely with their shopping cart. I find myself, my patience tested by cashiers who just don't seem to care. You know, they'll toss the peaches and they get all bruised. I find myself frustrated most recently with the supply chain shortages and now finding my favorite brand on that one particular item and having to settle for something else. I find those moments difficult. I don't like waiting. But what I've tried to do most recently, and I think is in line with what Jesus is talking about, is that when I find myself going shopping and tested in those experiences, that I try to practice empathy. Instead of getting upset and getting frustrated, rather to let my mind wander in empathy. You know, as I consider how long this line is, for me it's become what a wonderful opportunity to do some people watching. As I see the people in front of me or the people in other lines, to consider what their lives must be like. And to wonder, those things that are in that person's shopping cart, how many of those things were compromises that they had to make? Not because they didn't find the brand they liked, but because they had to choose between food or paying the electric bill. When I get frustrated with the cashiers, I often think to myself, is this person's only job, or is this perhaps their second or maybe even third job that they have to hold down in order to make it? And can you imagine trying to make it seem like you care if this is your 16th or 18th hour of the day working? When I get frustrated with people who are slow or who block the aisles with their carts, I think about perhaps that for this senior citizen, this is the one social outlet that they have all week long. The opportunity to get out of the house, out of the nursing home, to do some food shopping. This is a special moment for them. And why am I trying to hurry it along? Or when I get frustrated with the lack of the brands that I'm used to because there is a shortage in some of the things that we are used to having in bountiful quantities, I think about how fortunate we are that compared to other parts of the world that have so much less than us. I'll never forget when I went to visit Father Matthias and our sister parish in Uganda. And one of the first things that he did with me after I landed in Entebbe was we went to Kampala and we went to get some groceries. And I thought, oh, this isn't so bad. It's pretty nice. They had all kinds of things, all kinds of brands to choose from. And he wanted me to pick the things that I would want to eat throughout that week that I was going to be there so that I would be comfortable. That was his hospitality towards me. But then I quickly realized that that grocery store is not for Ugandans. It's for American expats. Ugandans don't go shopping there. Ugandans mostly grow their own food, and what little things that they need to get, they get from roadside shops. There are no brands there to choose from. That whole reality was made even more poignant for me in the next year when Father Matthias was visiting us, and I took him, to return the favor, grocery shopping so he could get the things that he wants to eat. And I unfortunately took him to what at that time was the new Mariano's in Ravenswood. You know, the one, I think it's up by Lawrence. Beautiful, beautiful Mariano's, right? And there we were, going down the aisles, and there's a guy playing piano at the front of the store. And people are walking around with their shopping carts and glasses of wine. And it suddenly dawned to me how jaunting of an image that must have been for him. I actually apologized to him. I felt I needed to. You see, my friends, waiting and practicing empathy in our waiting opens us up to the reality that the kingdom of God is not just a reality that we're going to wait for in the future, but rather it's a reality that is present to us in the here and now. If we are attentive to it, if we are sensitive enough to see it in the various blessings that come our way, how God indeed touches our lives in profound ways. And more than that, waiting for the kingdom is not just a passive activity. Waiting for the kingdom is also a preparation for, by continuing to work to build the kingdom of God that Jesus established on earth and promised to bring to its fulfillment at the end of time, by being blessings to others. It's in those moments that we perhaps can give a warm smile to someone, or give some time to our spouse or our children after a long day of work, or finding ways to alleviate the suffering of the poor, whether through our generous giving or volunteering at a food bank. What God invites us today, my friends, is not a torturous activity waiting for the kingdom of God. It's a kingdom, it's a world filled with much joy and much promise. But we need to reorient our lives, to make ourselves sensitive to it, to find it, and to help others find it as well. And to take joy in it. Take joy in the many ways that God comes to us, both great and small, even as tiny as a visit from a little hummingbird.